Greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Cornu Core, my patrons Clayton, Ruby, Stephanie, and Jonathan, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor or student. I'm going to save my voice. And try to get through a meaty subject. It's really fascinating to be caught up with the wonder of Pilates and information and learning more. And that just happened to me because of an email I got from one of my patrons that shared that in the martial arts that they were familiar with, they define themselves by 6 principles, and that something that this person writing me had read said that Pilates is these 6 principles, and so I always thought that, okay, so in 1981, in 1980, in the fall of 1980, I was at the Club Med at Copper Mountain teaching a stretching and meditation class. That's what it got called. To an international clientele, trying to get feedback on this point of view that the order that you do things in and the quality that you do them with, it matters. Order and quality. I came out of there back to Boulder and wanted to teach a class at Ferentino's, and he said, "You mean Pilates." And so this was the only book available which was the beginning of my love affair with Pilates. And it's so, it's right here in chapter 2, something different, that they talk about. Most important, the method relies on concentration, all capitalized, the word concentration. To do the movements properly, you must pay attention to what you are doing. No part of your body is unimportant. No motion can be ignored. The other watchwords, which is what they originally call these things that became the principles, will be explained in chapter 3, given the half-dozen basic principles, that's where they're calling them principles now, embodied in these words. The Pilates method can be summarized in a single sentence. A few well-designed movements properly performed in a balanced sequence are worth hours of doing sloppy calisthenics or forced extortions, contortions. Right? So, and really the words that introduce this book, that talk about Pilates, that tries to address the difference between East and West. So this book is definitely worth having because it became and is the basis of people interpreting Pilates or having a way of looking at things, or take Pilates to be an effort toward principles. those 6 specifically because of that book that was published in 1980. 80, right? But published by Freeman and Eisen years after Joe died. So, I always thought that one of these authors also authored a coffee table book on karate, and was once, anyway, in trying to validate that, on YouTube there's an interview with Gail Eisen, who's the co-author of this book. So I haven't even looked at it yet because I'm trying to maintain my focus on getting today's broadcast done, about where the everywhere point of view that Pilates is these principles. That's where it comes from. So know the book and know when the book was written and know who it was written by, and go look at that YouTube video and know more than I do until I look at it about the writing of that book. Okay? So that's one reason why looking at Pilates through those principles is where it comes from. But now, it's hard not to look at anything without looking for a realistic view of things, to look at money as well as prestige and presumption and all of that, but money especially, and utility. There you go. Utility and transferability. One of the reasons why the tsunami wave of passion is what it is because there's movements, there's words in the dictionary, and there's principles upon which to perform the words. And I know many of you would object, but that's one perspective. So, I brought a demonstration from my point of view about principles and how they're different than ideals. Now, a principle are commitments that one makes to guide one's actions. So in this book, right out of that book, are listed commitments one makes, or what represented by those words to guide one's actions. So it's like principles are guides to your action. An ideal is a way of moving to which one aspires. An ideal is a way of moving in which one aspires, meaning one's trying to make movement aspiring towards something. I put it all down. So imagine on the dock with a really big ship and the really big ropes that come down and circle around the cleats. And those ropes are twisted, and as they get tension on them, they like twist more. So I have here in my lap a bowl of water with a washcloth And the washcloth is meant to represent those big ropes. And when those big ropes have a tension applied to them, especially because they're woven in a spiral anyway, but the tension that's applied to them, right? Those are principles. That's evidence of what is going on here. All right? The ideal is the aspiration. And what comes out of the aspiration are the principles that are listed in Freeman and Eisen's book. Now, that's just my take on it. I can't wait to go watch the author of that book to make comment. What I'm offering you is a point of view that says, here's where the principles came from, not from Joe, but from a book way after he died, and that's one of the reasons they are what they are, but another reason is that it allows you to make whatever you want to out of Pilates, just basing it on an approach toward principles. Okay? MMP looks at Pilates as an ideal, and it's in the aspiration of the ideal that the principles come out. They're extruded out of the effort. Principles are extruded out of ideals that through aspiration to move within the ideal. What is the ideal? Well, the ideal to MMP is performing the mat in complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing. Let me see where my notes took me. 15. Yes. 15, 20, principles. So principles are commitments that one makes to guide one's actions. And ideals are a way of moving to which one aspires. So that was 20, 25. And for me, a principle inherently is referring to that which it comes from. Meaning it isn't it in and of itself, it's a principle is some part of a bigger thing. See what I'm saying? And in MMP, that bigger thing is the ideal. And it's in aspiration toward the ideal that the principles extrude out. Alright, so then number 2 in my titles. The first title was what? Principles enough. Are principles enough? And to make money and make of it whatever you want, yes. They're more than enough because it gives you the freedom to make of it whatever you want. But as everyone starts making of it what they want, the closer it is to what it is, if there is there to be, will certainly become more and more apparent to the overall culture, to humanity, to the population, to the people that are interested in it. 40. So, number 2. Consider Joe's point of view. So, in my travels, I would say the thing that matters most to me about Joe, the thing that defines Joe, is that he was a survivor. Joe was a survivor. And that, for the MMP point of view, sets up that his method is survival training. And in gravity, and off you go in your understanding of that. But I had somebody come up to me and say, you know, Michael, really, Joe was German. And it was an acknowledgement of a uniqueness of character that was either predominant of or impossible to look at without consideration, that Joe was German. And so in the book, The Pilates Method of Physical and Mental Conditioning by Freeman and Eisen, they talk about Eastern and Western. In summary, each of these approaches, Western and Eastern, fails to produce the benefits of the other. It is hard to combine them because in many ways they are incompatible. And the answer isn't to do them both because not really complementary. You're more likely to end up with the drawbacks of both approaches than all their benefits. What is needed is something different, a system that starts with more unified assumptions and goals. So, to me, Joe was German and he was philosophical. And so you look and Schopenhauer and Schiller, right? He was very familiar with, as well as see, my point is Western thought. A lot of Western thought comes out of German minds. Is that fair to say? Nietzsche and Einstein and Karl Marx and I attach a Western frame of mind to being willful in a way that Eastern is not. So my opinion as Michael Miller is that doing Pilates is a willful act. It's a Western-minded act. And there's more depth to it than I can appreciate. But I know that, okay, so in this book, where do you think they got the statement that concentration, that more important, the method relies on concentration? The method relies on concentration. Where do they get that from? Well, they got that from Joe's original book. Joe's original book, Return to Life Through Contrology. Always keep your mind wholly concentrated on the purpose of the exercises as you perform them. This is vitally important in order for you to gain the results sought. Otherwise, there would be no valid reason for your interest in contrology. So this image is a watercolor that Joe had hanging on a ceiling that is a quote of Schiller's. And it's where everybody gets their version of the quote. I'm very blessed by Tanya in Zurich. Be sure to work with her if you're doing Pilates in Zurich. I got from her. Oh, it's not. That's not it. Where is it? Hold on. Somewhere. Somewhere I have a photocopy of a translation of a play that Schiller wrote called The Death of Wallenstein. You know, maybe you can go find it on the web like that. And in the copy that I have, it's a translation, German to English, of the entire play. Okay? This line in the play, as part of the translation of the entire play, it is the soul which builds itself a body. It is the soul which builds itself a body. Now, in the MMP point of view, it doesn't take into consideration entities other than the physical person right in front of you. But I would suggest that the way the soul builds itself a body is through observing, right? I mean, it's beyond the scope of my interest in helping you as a Pilates instructor to go that deeply into philosophy so unilaterally. Just know that the principles were and are, the principles came from someone other than Joe after Joe died, and they've been very functional in allowing Pilates to be a improv experience at whatever level and in whatever way you could improv, right? On the spectrum of Pilates has no essence at all to there's something to it, and we're in pursuit of it and aspiring towards it. In doing the mat and combining our being, thinking, and observing, we're doing our best to integrate, to coordinate our capacities so that we do a decent job of surviving to the point of thriving. All right? So, what MMP, okay, so there's Joe's work, Return to Life, and there's this work that became the paradigm to structure and teach Pilates through. And there's this book in 2000. And in this book, it points to the ideal within Joe's original work. And today, in 2019, has an explanation of Pilates that makes sense, according to the great feedback I got recently. So, all right. Everyone wants to assume that Pilates just is this thing that obviously you know what it is, and you know it based on what you know about it, and whatever you know about it is all there is to know, unless you go and get more exposure to what everybody else knows. without paying any attention to a point of view that explains it for what it is. So, Geist, in the quote, the translator of the play uses the word soul. And in Joe's book, defining his method, written in English, he uses the word spirit. And so, as I say, I think the soul builds itself a body. How did I say that? It does that by observing. And what matters to me as a Pilates instructor is that observing, participate as part of what you're seeking to completely coordinate. It's as simple as that. But where Joe is coming from has real depth and roots. That are worth exploring if you're philosophically oriented. Life can't live forever. So make of it what you can while you can. Read between the lines, because the lines in one way were, here are the principles and this is Pilates. And then so much grew in Pilates and in terms of diversity and impression and points of view, that the origins of that book are now more obvious and more out in the open than ever before. Certainly wasn't than ever before. And in the search for the Holy Grail, I'm here to tell you that the Holy Grail is right there in Joe's book. His definition, his promise, and his sequence are all you need to get to the experience you're after within the MMP point of view. Okay. Evaluate points of view. Know what you know, and then somehow figure out how to politely help other people. And that came from yesterday. When you look at things differently, things become different. But a new way of looking at things, or a different way of looking at things, like a different point of view. And what matters to me is that I'm crystal clear about the MMP point of view, and that you have to go beyond principles to ideals, or the ideal, in order to find what you're after. And what is the ideal? Well, in MMP, the ideal is that Pilates is an experience. And the experience is a coordination of being, thinking, and observing that is a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. That's this point of view. It's up to you to add 2 and 2, and then direct your thinking. Know what you know, and then where are you going with this? Geist.